The few days leading up to the end of the school year are always the most interesting days of school. There are no more assignments to expect, nobody pays attention in class, and every subject that's not science or math becomes a free gaming session. The end of school is always a fun time, whichever grade you're in. But at my school, people tend to get pretty wild, and this year's end of school period was definitely one to remember. A bunch of things happened that drew laughs from the students and various infringements from the teachers. I'm going to talk about some particularly memorable events from the tail end of the school year. Usually for us, the end of school period is one of the least serious times of the school year. The teachers don't even get mad when nobody pays attention in class, because sometimes there is no class and we just play Kahoot all lesson. But this time, things were a little different, because for the first time, we did exams. Yep, all the students in the 10th grade in my school did exams this year. The exams took place on the second last week of school, so instead of winding down and tuning out of class, we were getting even busier than normal. Well, that's how it was for most of us. At our school, the year 10 exams don't actually count towards any important grade or score for the later years, so some people figured it was okay to whiff the exam. But for people like me, that was unfortunately not an option. It was either do good or die. So I and my fellow studious peers undertook the feverish nights of study to cram as much information about anything as possible. The exams I did were math, geography, German, chemistry, and physics. Obviously, the subject I invested the most time into was math. You know, for various reasons. Anyway, we were told that we were allowed to bring one page of notes into the exam. It had to be A4, single-sided, and handwritten. No photocopying or printing. Immediately, those of us who cared were thrust into a situation. Cramming a year's worth of math into a single side of A4 paper seemed impossible, so we did the only thing we could to handle the situation. Write really, really small. I'm not kidding. The size of my notes was probably comparable to size 8 font on Microsoft Word. I mean, just look at this. You can literally see the blood, sweat, and tears that went into writing this thing. I didn't really study for the other subjects like English, geography, or German, but I did make sure to set some time aside for chemistry and physics. I do have my priorities. When the second last week of school came, the exams were spread out over 3 days. The first day would be for humanities and German. The second would be math and English, and the last day would be science. The great thing about exams was that you were allowed to go home after your exams were done, and the exams on Tuesday and Wednesday finished at around lunchtime. The science papers were shorter and only took up to recess. I predicted that the first 2 exams would be easy, so I wasn't stressed at all on Tuesday. We entered the exam rooms and sat down. We logged on to the online exam. I was ready to do this. Geography would be a piece of cake. I started to read the maps provided to answer the first questions, and immediately started to bleed out of my nose. Yep, that's what happened. I wasn't itching it, or picking it, or anything. Literally just breathe, and boom. Right there in the exam. Thanks, nose.
You alright there, lad?
No, please help. It was too late to back out at that point, and the exam time was ticking down fast. I snagged some tissues and tried to hold in the blood while I tried to read maps. Let me tell you, it's not easy to read grid references while blood is pouring out of your face. About 5 minutes later, I checked to see if the blood had stopped. The moment I removed the tissue, my red blood cells went straight out the gates and onto my uniform. And by the way, the summer uniform for my school is a white shirt like most other high schools. Oh yeah, you can see that stain alright. Luckily, a teacher saw my situation and kindly provided me with a tissue box. I needed that because the blood didn't stop until about 10 minutes later. Remember, this all happened while I was trying to take an exam. I walked out of that exam room with a very sore nose and a very suspicious uniform paint job. I lost count of the number of times I was stared at for the rest of the day. The rest of the exams went off without much incident, and the math exam went surprisingly well. I didn't even have to look at my notes much during the exam, which made me question what I spent all that time writing them for. At the end of all that, I'd say it was a good experience. But just remember this. If you're ever taking an exam at a school or university and you see someone bleeding their face out, do them a favor and just hand them a tissue. So far, I've only talked about things related to the exams themselves. But this is high school, and you know not everyone's gonna be keen on actually doing the exams. If you're not aware, during an exam, you're supposed to be dead silent. You're not even allowed to get out of your seat to get a tissue, which was a problem for some of us. Our exams were in this big building that housed several classrooms, and that whole building was a silent zone. You weren't supposed to make any noise in or around the building. So you can imagine that the teachers were pretty unhappy when during the German exam they heard these noises being uttered. See! Good old Cristiano Ronaldo. We all love him, whether you like soccer or not. I am not sure why, but recently his celebration call has become strangely popular amongst the boys in my school, which is in no way a problem, unless you're in an exam. The next day, on the second day of exams, the assistant head of the senior school gathered us all around the benches outside the exam classrooms and made a speech. So, I was going to set up some goals out on the oval, and I was going to kick a goal and run around for a bit, and then I would jump and land like this, and you would all go, "See!" At least he entertained us a bit, but after that he gave a talk about how sounds like that were not acceptable within the grounds of an exam, and that any person who uttered the call would be being extremely disrespectful. So naturally, that just increased the number of "C's" heard throughout the rest of the exam period. To the students' credit, there was mostly silence in the exam itself, but once we were out of class, it was all "See" as we headed out to lunch. I think the teachers gave up on trying to stop us, so it sounded like Ronaldo was kicking goals all day at my school. The next week, on the last day of school, we had a final assembly for the year 10s, and every teacher that went up to speak was awarded with a chorus of "See" when they concluded their speeches and returned to their seats. Then we had sports awards, which of course received even more "See." And then we had academic awards, and you know what? I think you already know what happened. The "See" wave got so bad that according to my friends, a teacher commented that we were the worst behaved year 10s that she had ever seen, and that teacher had once had her car keyed by some year 10s. So that means that our "Sees" were bad enough to be worse than literally keying a car. I think that's an achievement, lads. Good job. After exams, there was one day of school left for all of us. The week after exams, we only had to attend the Tuesday, and then we would be free. Technically, school ended on Friday for the rest of the school, but the year 10s got off early because of exams and other stuff. So, on that day, the teachers had organized a series of announcements for next year's important stuff. Honestly, most of us snoozed through it. But the fun part came after that, because we got to go out on the oval and play some games. We got organized into teams, and I ended up with James and Hanno amongst some other people. There was a whole grade level dodgeball with a tiny boundary, which Hanno and James struggled particularly with due to their largest hitboxes. Ha ha, sucks to be tall. Then we played some botched version of Capture the Flag where our team got absolutely wiped due to suboptimal teamwork. We also tried fitting all 11 of our team members into the space of a hula hoop, which nearly ended with several lifelong injuries. Finally, we played a game where we had to create a scene that described a country, and the teacher had to guess which country we were describing. All of us looked at each other, and then, as one, we all saluted. We were unified, confident, and extremely offensive. What made it even better was that of all the teachers to come look at our display, it was the German teacher. She said,
"Oh ja, that is Germany, very funny, yeah."
And actually laughed. And we won that event by just doing that salute. I want to give honorable mentions to some other teams. There was one team with a person who came from Greece, so they all lined up and made a human arrow that pointed towards him. There was one team that reenacted a very, well-known arrest. If there was a second round, our team had agreed that we'd all point towards one of our teammates who came from Egypt. This incident took place the week before exams. My friends Ben, James, Hanno, Wisbot, and Dylan have a really cool German teacher that we'll call Herr Hans. On their last German lesson, Ben came to Nick and me and suggested that we pull a prank on Herr Hans. He said that Nick and I should enter the class and sit in on the lesson, but the twist would be that I would be posing as Ben. He thought that we could pull it off since we're both Asians and about the same height. We were even dressed in the same uniform that day. So Nick and I waited outside the class and waited for Ben to ask to go to the bathroom. When he did, we waited a few minutes before entering, and I was careful not to say anything, so I didn't reveal the difference in voice. When the other boys saw me, they tried hard not to laugh. Nick quickly explained that our PE teacher let him do whatever he wanted, and we sat in on the lesson. We actually sat there for a good 20 minutes before we both asked to go to the toilet, escaping for the rest of the lesson. I'm still not sure if Herr Hans ever found out that Ben and I switched. I guess that just proves that nobody in my school can tell Asians apart. I blame our low population. Where's the representation, I say? Looking back on the year, 10th grade has been pretty poggers. It's been full of fun, craziness, and maybe just a bit of learning. I'm definitely pumped for the next year and what hilarious misadventures that will bring. So for now, goodbye to 2021, goodbye to year 10, and see you next year.
See!